The Nairobi Declaration is the output from a major international conference that we held in Nairobi a few months ago in the last week of April. The conference was the 9th international conference on community-based adaptation. We've held them in different countries in previous years. This year was in Kenya. We had 400 people from 90 countries come. They spent a whole week in Kenya. The first 3 days, the international participants went out and spent 3 days with vulnerable communities, and then they came back to Nairobi and we had a conference for the rest of the few days, focusing on measuring and making effective adaptation. The declaration that came out of it spoke to the international summits that are taking place this year. The next one will be in July in Addis Ababa on financing for development. The one after that will be on Sustainable Development Goals in New York at the General Assembly in September. And finally in Paris at the 21st Conference of Parties of the Framework Convention on Climate Change, we hope to have a new climate treaty. The common thread between all of these, financing for development, Sustainable Development Goals and climate change, is that the poorest people on the planet, the poorest communities, are the targets for finance, are the goal for the goals of sustainable development, and are the people that we want to prevent from causing harm to in the climate change arena. So their voices and their concerns should be taken into account. So in a nutshell, the Nairobi Declaration is an appeal to the heads of governments who are going to be meeting in Addis Ababa in July, in New York in September, and in Paris in December, to take account of the most vulnerable people. And if their agreements do not end up helping the most vulnerable communities, then those will be bad agreements, and we don't want them to have bad agreements. So one of the things we are going to be doing with the Nairobi Declaration is many of us will be going to Paris for COP21. We will give it to everybody. We have already started giving it to senior officials in governments and in international agencies to make them aware of it. And in COP21, we will be giving it to the French presidency and to all senior officials who are there. We will also be doing a special side event in Paris as part of the Development and Climate Day's 2-day side event on the 5th and 6th of December, the Saturday and Sunday in the middle of the COP. We always do this at the COPs, Development and Climate Days. We had it last year in Lima as well. In that 2-day event, we will have a session on the community-based adaptation from the voices from the most vulnerable communities to the Conference of Parties, to the leaders who are going to frame the final agreement in Paris. The main challenge for us is that very often we find in the international global meetings that the voices of the most vulnerable do not come through. Even though the countries that are representing them, like the least developed countries and the countries from Africa, do bring those concerns at from the national level, the officials from national governments are the ones who represent their countries, and they do their best to bring those issues to the fore. But the voices of the communities themselves are missing. There are many communities around the world. As I mentioned, in Nairobi we had 400 representatives from around the world who are doing some fantastic things. They are doing some many different things. So the appeal really is to the rest of the world to say, we, the vulnerable communities, are not sitting idle. We are doing things to tackle climate change. We want everybody else to do the same.